Okay, so here we have this tab component we'll be working with. So it's going to be a multi-part form. So you can come in here, name, email address, sector, and then we'll submit it. And so what we'll be doing, let's set up the project first. I'll be going through that with you. And then we'll develop using Slater prompts. So we will be adding some validation around this. So we'll disable the button using JavaScript. We'll validate each field as we move between tabs. We will do some regex to validate that it's an email. We'll use JavaScript to move through the form, and we'll enable that submit button once everything's filled out. This will be an interesting problem in that we'll be using bits and pieces from the Slater prompt, and while also using our knowledge of Webflow and the tab component, because the Slater AI probably won't fully understand. Well, I'm sure it doesn't know the tab component like we do. So it's going to be interesting in that we need to understand kind of the more generic problem that we're solving, and then adding our layer of knowledge around Webflow to make it all work. Cool. Okay, so this project only has a home page, and I'm just going to quickly publish this. I want to see, I actually don't know if this has a sitemap. Cool, it does. So we'll use the Webflow the Slater single script, even though it is only a single page, and so probably not that useful. But I'm gonna go into my Slater class, and I can just paste any URL from that project, and when I tab out, it will use regex, which we'll be talking about today, to get us the Webflow URL that we need. Let's call this Jared tabs. Let's use white. Don't use this much. Cool. So I am going to just write to this index page, and I'll just keep the title the same. First thing I like to do is just write a console log, save that, and then I have access to this script. So I'm going to copy that. Because it's a single script, the place I want to put it is going to be in the site settings. Here in the custom code, and it looks like we already have some Slater code in there, so we'll just paste it here. I've been doing some work to kind of clean this up as well, so we'll have a cleaner script released pretty soon. And if I come back to my project, open up the console, if I refresh, I should get a hi, which I did not get. Let's see what I did. I never published. Let's make sure I publish. There we go. There's our hi. How's everyone doing? I imagine that's quite straightforward for everyone. Any questions getting that set up? You might be a little bit behind, but I'm confident you guys can handle that part. Okay, so we read through the prompts a little bit, but let's talk through what we want to do. Last week I showed you the Sequoia project I worked on. It was a multi-tab, kind of a large form, and So that's kind of what this is based on. We see this kind of multi-part form use case fairly often. So the first thing we want to do, let's make all of our selects, or sorry, our inputs and selects, let's make them required. So come in here, and I think this one was already required, so we're good there. And we can also make this required. So this first item that we want to accomplish is disabling the button. So we could do this with JavaScript, but since we know that the button's going to be disabled initially, let's just go in and disable it now. So let's go into Slater. This one should be an easy prompt, so I'm just going to say, can you disable the, let's see, we actually have these Webflow selectors. This is going to get more useful. Right now, we could, actually don't see the selector we'd want to use from there. So I'm going to come in here and I want to make sure this is the only one because I don't think it is. So there's 4 of these buttons. So we need to be a little bit more selective. So I'm going to add this ID, I'll call it submit VPN. And honestly, like when I'm writing JavaScript to Webflow, this is a constant issue, is this ID can change based on, like, I'm working with multiple people oftentimes. So I'm going to use a submit button, but kind of like FinSuite does, a data attribute may be a good way to go. Why don't we just do that just so we can see how to select it. So I'm going to call this it's a good data selector, and I'll call this button submit button. Okay, so I'm going to go back to tab 1 and I'm going to publish this. Now when I refresh, okay, so I have this data selector submit button. I'm going to copy all of this and come back into Slater. Can you disable the button with the following data attribute? Attribute. We'll see how well it selects. I should ask it to do it with jQuery too. Is everybody up to speed with me? So I'm going to just pull this out. So submit button, document query selector. This all looks right. Good job. I'm just going to say, can you do it with jQuery? And I've talked about this a few times. I think jQuery is easier for beginners to write JavaScript. And jQuery is bundled in every single Webflow project. So all things being equal, I would say you should you should just ask the prompt, or ask Slater to give you jQuery. And let's just look at that. So here you have a selection. This is kind of more elegant, potentially. Same thing as here. and then you're using this jQuery method of prop and disabled true. Here you're just saying, good point. Okay. So both of these things do the exact same thing. This is a single line, and yeah, in this case, like either way works, and they're pretty much equally the same, like ease. But there are a number of times where jQuery does make things easier. So let's just stick with that for now. Okay, so now if I come back, you'll notice nothing's happening when I click on it. So it would be good to potentially add a disabled class, or just adding, you can also target disabled with CSS. And so we like a common thing, it's opacity 0.5, and maybe cursor not allowed. So you could add that to your project if you wanted to. I'm just going to leave it as disabled for now. So we're good there. Let's go back to our next step. So let's validate each field before moving to the next tab. So I'm going to come into Slater. I'm just going to clear this chat out because I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to say, please validate each field with the required attribute. Validate presence of a value. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Like if this was just a single field, or a single form without these multiple tabs, we could kind of just stop there and see what happens. But we also want to be thinking about what happens when you're clicking on different things. So I'll just ask this question to start with, or I'll ask Slater to do this. Forgot to say with jQuery. So we want to allow the user to kind of go throughout the entire form and see the fields. Imagine this being like a really long form where it may take more than a single session to write all of the write to all the form fields. And that's where we're going to be doing some things like saving form data to the browser can help with that. Let's hop back in. I imagine this is ready. Okay, so it's giving me a bunch of HTML. So I'm going to, let's just pull this out for now. And we can delete this. So it does sometimes return like the full HTML. So you'll want to make sure you're also removing the script tag, since that script tag is already added to the Webflow project. Okay, so we have form. I don't know if that would select it. I should have been more specific around that, but let's just see. So that does get us our form. And on submit, it is going to check validity. Please fill out all required fields. So that's a pretty lousy prompt. Let's clear that chat. Let's do a little bit better. Okay, so using jQuery, let's start there. I want to validate each field with required attribute. Validate on blur. And what else would I want? Help me out, guys. If there is no value, add a message, add an error message. So let's try that one. And unfortunately, OpenAI is fairly slow in their responses, so you do have to be a little bit patient. How's everyone else doing? Are you guys trying to solve it on your own, or are you just following along with me? What was that, Jeff? Okay, so let's see about this. Okay, document ready, good. Input required. This is mostly good, but we also had to select. So one thing we could do is we could say select required. And so it's going to add this blur event. I think we talked about blur. Does anybody know what blur does? So you have, yeah, specifically moving out of it. So you have focus, which is when you're moving into it, and blur when you're moving out of it. And so it's going to be checking if there's a value. If there's no value, it's going to be adding this message to shoots. Sorry guys, I accidentally pushed back. Oh darn, I didn't save it. Let's try that again. Okay, so this is looking for an error div, so this isn't quite right. So let's say, can you please update to add error message as a, can you please add an error message div. If field is empty. So see if we can fix that. So we, sorry, let me just go a little bit smaller. Okay, so this is thinking about whatever input it is or whatever field. And so next is looking for this error class. And again, we don't have that, so we're going to ask the AI to add a div instead of just finding a div that it thinks is there. I don't think it solved it. Let's see. Yeah, not helpful, AI. So does anybody know how we would solve that? So we can say append, and then write, say, let's just do a div for now. And let's do after, actually. It's supposed to append. Append is inside the element, after it's after the element. And then this part, we don't do, what I would say is like each time, let's see where we get here. Okay, so if I come in here and I exit out, or if I blur, then it gets added. You'll notice every time we do this, we have the issue of it creating a new one. So this is where I'm better at JavaScript than I am at prompt writing. So I'm going to copy this again, and let's try again. But you'll notice like I'm going down a path with my prompts that I don't want to any longer. And so that's where I'm clearing the chat and starting over. So using jQuery, I want to validate each field, each input, and select with the required attribute. Validate on blur. If there is no value, add a div with an error message. What else? And please remove the error message after each blur. I don't know if that's really getting what I want. Again, this is where I'm not great at writing prompts, but I know what I need to do. But let's just try that out. Oh, shoot. So that was an error coming back from, oh, I broke something. I'm not sure why that was coming back undefined, because it's coming back awfully quick. So something must not have been set. But if you refresh the page and clear the chat, looks like that fixes it. I'll look into that error further. Any questions so far? Anything popping up? Yeah, I will do that. Okay, so let's look at this again. Okay, it did get that part that we wanted. So it's getting the value. The sibling error message. Yeah, I don't get why it's having a really hard time creating an element. So because the siblings, it's going to be looking for the next one. It's expecting that error message to be already in the code, which I'm pretty sure we didn't do. That is an approach you could take, but I don't necessarily like having extra HTML in there if you don't need it. Yeah, so there's no error message there. So here's where I'm just going to kind of take over and use my knowledge as opposed to continuing to try the prompts, because I am having only so much success with them. Okay, so we're getting the value. So this dot after div field is required. So if there's no value, let's do this here. And what we want to do is, I don't like this. We want to say, let's add a class there. And we can say this dot next dot air dot remove. Okay, so let's see how we do with that. Okay, perfect. So you'll see we're only getting this one field required, and the reason that is because every time we blur, we remove any errors if they're there. And this is, again, I think this is nice with jQuery, where you may be throwing errors if you do this with raw JavaScript without doing some error handling. So that's one of those benefits. Okay, so as we go through the tabs, you'll notice we can throw those errors, and we still have the submit button that's disabled. So we go over here. So we've disabled the button. We are validating each field before moving to the next tab. And let's do this one in a bit. Let's move through the forms. This should be really simple. It's really simple, and I'm not even going to ask the AI for this one, because this is kind of like specialized knowledge that you have to have of Webflow. So Webflow.js is JavaScript that Webflow's written and is bundled with each project. And I have tried to follow how it does the going to the next tab, but there's a bunch of classes that get added. You can see all those updates to the DOM as you switch between tabs. Trying to do that is trying to get that kind of exactly done with JavaScript is hard, unless you use this kind of shortcut, which is, I'm going to say, let's get this. So I'm going to select on the selector. Let me make that a little bit larger. Okay, so it looks like we got two, which is a little weird. Let's look at the first one. So that's the one we're looking for. Let's see if there's a second one. I'm not sure what this second one would be. It's probably just the holder. So that's probably not the best selector to use. Let's just use this ID here. Okay, so that gets us our tab. So I can just say .click on that. And that is just, it's mimicking the user behavior. And so that click event happens, and then Webflow JavaScript handles the rest. And so we can take this, and what we need to do is we need to tie this to this tab. So there's a number of approaches we could take here. The easiest one that I would probably recommend is adding a data attribute to each of these. So I can say data next equals 2. But let's try just doing it with JavaScript as we have it now. So we can get clever on this, and we can say, okay, let's just see what we have with, I think it was .w button. So there's 4 of them. So if we get this first one, we know the first one's going to be going to the second tab. So there's a jQuery method. We could say index, I believe. No. This probably won't work. Let's see what this gives us. So 4. That's not what I'm looking for. So yeah, probably the easiest way to get that this is the first button. So what I'm trying to think of right now is a more general approach to this. So we can be very specific and we can just write, let's just do the very specific way and then we can look at refactoring it. So I can come in here and I can say, using that first one, which I could also just use the first. The problem with this is there aren't like second. So we do last, I think we'd probably do like nth child. But I don't remember that one exactly. The other approach we can take, which will be easier, is we can just take this object, this jQuery object, and we can say we're getting that first one. Does that make sense, everyone, what we're doing here? So let's go back to this real quick. So here, this gives us 4 instances of that button. Doing this gets us the first instance of that button. And so doing this gets us a jQuery instance of that first one. So it's a little confusing. There's lots of different ways we could handle that. Like I was showing you, we could also say dot first. But I'm just going to go with this particular solution. And we can say dot on click, run a function. And we're just going to say, we'll just be very specific now. We're going to get general later. So what was our ID that we used? If you push up, you can quickly run through these, which is kind of nice. I'm not seeing it. I thought we already had it. So I just want to get the ID for this tab. And you'll notice as we start doing this, we'll start seeing a pattern, and then that's when we can refactor. Okay, so coming back here. So that got us to the second one. Now this one's not getting us to the next one. So if we just copy and paste this, we know we have to get the second button, and it's 0 index, so the second button's 1. And we can make the assumption that it is tab 2, I guess. Let's try that. Yep. So let's quickly copy this twice more. Okay, so then we do 3 and 4. And we should be able to get through. I guess we only have to do it 3 times, not 4 times. So name, email address, selector. So that allows us to get through the form. The other thing we can do here is we can add this, we can also run a validation on this. So I'm going to move this quickly down here so everything's in this document ready. And so this is a little bit tricky because we need to, what's the word, traverse the DOM to get the input when we click on this. So I'm going to skip that for now, just so we can get through everything. But so the next thing we need to do, we're moving through. Yeah, let's enable this button if fields are valid before we go back and validate the email with regex. Okay, so when we get on, let's console log. So, because I'm getting a little confused, and so this is. Okay, so the first one, the second one, now the third one. So you'll notice here's my tab panel console log, and I'm on this fourth panel. So this is where I want to check everything and then activate this submit button if I need it. So I can say, let's write a function. So I'm going to say validate form, and then down here we can write the function. So function validate form, and essentially what we're going to do, I'm going to copy some of this. So we'll get each of these, and we'll say var form fields. And we're going to loop over each of these at this point. I'm also going to set, so var form, or let's just say valid equals true. So we're assuming that everything's going to be valid. But now let's do a form field, and I'm going to take a snippet. Close this down a little bit. So, okay, so this form field is going to provide us with an array. Let's quickly look at that. So you'll notice there's 3 fields in here. So if we do a for loop over this, we'll go through each of these different elements. And so we're going to say, instead of things, our array is form fields, and so we can say var field equals this, and we want to do pretty much this here. Okay, so here's the form field. Instead of this, we want to use the field. So we're making a jQuery object, we're getting the value, and let's not worry about this for now. If there's no value, we'll not worry about this now either. We're going to say valid equals false. So we'll loop through each of those 3 times, and then we'll write an if statement here. So if valid is true, then we want to take this disable, and we'll say false on that. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break here. How's everybody feeling about that? So I know I kind of went through some of that. Some of you I know are familiar with a lot of what we talked about. Others may not be. So again, we're getting an array. We're setting a variable to true. We're looping through that array. If any of those fields are not, if there's no value, then we're going to set it to false. And if it's false, we're not going to do anything to this button. But if it's true, so if this flag never gets raised, then we can change this to make it disabled false. Okay, so let's take a quick look over here. Okay, so if I go through this now, I still can't click. It's still disabled. But if we come back here, and I say Jared, email, and select a sector, let's look at that. So you'll notice it's no longer disabled, and I can submit it. So there's still a few things we can do. Like we can run a validation on these as we go through each one. Rather than do that, let's just add a validation here saying what you need to fill out still. So we've already got a semblance of that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get this, which we already know. We already have that selected. So we can just take this and we can say dot before. So it's the opposite of after. And we can add this here. Oops. Okay, let's just even look at this. So we're getting that button and we're setting something before. And this should do something, but it's not going to solve it necessarily for us completely. So I'm going to come back here, refresh. Let's go through. And you'll notice it printed that out 3 times. But that's not helpful. We know a field is required. What field is required? So we can do something to get that. This is where I'm going to write a debugger, because it's going to be a little bit tricky to just kind of solve it on your own. So this is a very common thing that I do. We'll stop the code there and we'll see what the context is. So if I come here, I can now see exactly where this stops. So I can see what field we're on. And I have this data name that I can use. So if I do jQuery field dot data set, I believe, and name. No, it doesn't like that. So let's do a quick jQuery get data attributes. Oh, it's dot data. So I can Google that. That's how I've done it for the last 20 years. I can also ask Slater AI, and I'm sure he would be able to answer back properly. Dot data set is just, it's the raw JavaScript way of doing it. Okay, so that's useful. So if I come back into my code, I'm going to use something called an object literal. And that just means I'm using this third tick mark, which is right above the tab or right below the escape key. And I can say, I can use this $, and I'm just going to paste in that data name that we got. And so now that let's see what that looks like. Cool. So name field is required, email field is required, field is required. So obviously we would want to have a better name on this one. It should be sector, but you'll notice we're getting that one right there. Cool. So we have 10 more minutes. There's a couple of different things we could do. I think we should do the regex on the email. But we could actually run the validation when we click on tab 4. Let's do that real quick, since that should be pretty easy. So we are already validating the form here, so we can just do a click event on this, click, write a function, and we'll just take this validate form here. Let's see if that solves it. Cool, exactly what we thought. So let's write regex for the email field, but there's some other quick things we could do, which is we could refactor this to be dynamic, I should say. But let's open up this. I'm going to clear out this chat. I would like to validate that form, that email field is a valid email using jQuery and regex. I think we talked about regex at a prior call. It is extremely complex. I cannot write regex on my own. Anytime I need to use regex, it's pretty much me Googling it and then going to the Stack Overflow where somebody who understands regex has written it before. Like a more common one, like, is it a valid email? Should be pretty simple to get. I've been able to write some really complex regex using Slater AI, and specifically here in Slater. So when you start a new project, this right here, like, there is no way I could have solved this on my own. But it was relatively simple with Slater. So just removing all that. Yeah, this is one of the magics. Okay, so this looks quite complex. Not surprising, regex is complex. Oh, shoot. Okay, so let's look through this. Okay, so we've got the email input, and on blur, we are going to run a function. We'll get the email from the value, that we've seen all of that. Here's the email regex. So you can ask the AI to explain it, and it's pretty nice. It doesn't do it on this particular prompt, it looks like. So we're going to use this test, which is a JavaScript method. And so test the email against the regex pattern. So if it's not valid, we're going to run adding a class and then doing this same thing. So let's just use what we did last time in place of this. And this is kind of nice, adding air class to the actual input. We won't worry about that. But if you wanted like a red outline, that's how that would happen. We actually don't need to make this a variable, so I'm going to remove that as well. This should be a valid email. On blur, if it is valid, then we remove it. Let's do it the same way we did last time, where each time we just remove, where did we do that? Right here. So let's see how that does. Looks pretty good, I believe. Okay, so if I blur, field is required. Okay, it's not running. Does anybody have any ideas why it wouldn't be running? So I'm looking at the ID is email. That's my first guess, which is correct. So this is, again, where we can, let me show you the other way I debug. So if I go into sources, down here, I can add a breakpoint. And you'll notice it's not getting this triggered. So let's see that we're getting something. Oh. Okay. Did I do that last time as well? Okay, so if we go through here, you'll see, like, we can just see exactly what's happening. And perfect. But it's getting overridden because the field is required. So let's try that again. And so it's working, but again, we're going to run into that issue where the initial, so it's running this one, and then it's running this one. And so this one right here is removing that validation. So what we can do is we can just move this into our other validation. And the one thing we'll want to do is we'll want to make sure this doesn't run every time. So we'll want to say something like if whatever, then run this. So I'm going to say, so we should just be able to say this. Let's go here real quick, and I solve a lot of my problems just in the console because it's quicker. So I can say email dot attr ID is email. So attr is just attributes, so we can get any attributes. So like we could also get like something like the placeholder. Oops, not there. Oops, I spelled it. Huh. Oh, there's no placeholder, so that's why it didn't give me anything. But what we can do is we can just say, okay, if it's this, if this equals email, then run this. But of course, that will work. What we really want to do is we want to use this because it's going to be based on that. So if I go back to tab 2, now we run both of them, which is maybe fine. We could probably do, we could do an if else. So here we have the if, else, and then I will move this into here. Let's see how we do there. Oops. Yeah, so of course we could write additional validation. So we could check on this, but we could also check if it's a value. So we could have an if else here to give a different error message. But I think just saying this should be a valid email is still accurate enough. So we are at time, so I do want to allow anyone to hop, but are there any questions you guys want to talk about before we end this? So I think we have a pretty good solution. But let me just talk about some of the other things that I thought we could do. So we did this one, we did this one. We actually did this one. So if you actually did get through and submitted it, it would be nice if that submission was customized, saying, "Hi Jared, thanks for submitting the form," or "Hi, this is the data you submitted to the form." So that's one we could do. This one, saving form data to local storage, is also really useful for some of these longer forms. This would be great for using Slater AI because it's fairly easy to do, but this is a skill or a concept that most of us haven't learned. It took me quite a while in my JavaScript career before I found use cases to save to local storage, but it is extremely powerful. So local storage is just like a database that you can have on the browser. So that's something you should look into if you're wanting to spend additional time with this particular project. Cool. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll let you guys all jump. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to jump in and solve some more problems with you. I would love to see any successful projects if you are able to get it running. And if you have any use cases that you would like to solve in the future, let me know and we can tackle them here at the office hours.